When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. I'm your host, Laura Babcock, and today we have a guest who can speak to us about one of the biggest stories circling the globe. It's a story that former Chief of Staff to Donald Trump, he was the longest serving Chief of Staff, General Kelly, has come out on the record and said that Trump was in fact a fascist, that he wants to be a fascist, that he spoke about Hitler and wanting Hitler's generals, and that Hitler did some good. Matthew Dowd is a household name for many of us. You would have known him from ABC's programs. You would have known him from Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace, MSNBC, and so many other shows. He was the chief strategist with the Bush-Cheney re-election campaign in 2004, and then became an independent, and now is pro-Kamala all the way. So Matthew, thank you for joining us from Texas. America is within 2 weeks of the most consequential election, not just in our lifetimes, maybe one of the most consequential political moments in world history, because this story is not just about the United States and about their checks and balances and about them teetering on the edge of fascism. It's about the rest of the world as well. And as Canadians, we have friends and family in the United States that we care about, but we're also worried about what a US fascist leader could do to the world and to Canada, which has a growing Maple MAGA movement, which hopefully we can get into as well. I'd love some of Matthew's advice on how we stop ourselves from ending up on the cliff that we find our American family. Can I just off the top get your reaction to the General Kelly news on the record and this story that is blowing up around the world?
Sure, Laura. Great to be with you, and thank you for all you do in the pro-democracy movement in the world. I live in Texas, but I grew up in Michigan, so I'm very familiar with the Canadian border and the importance of it to our country and the friendship that we have shared as Canadians to Americans over 200 and something years of our own independence in this. This is we're already in, as you said, and I don't think you overstated. Sometimes people think we use hyperbole. But it is probably one of the most consequential elections in world history, not just our lifetimes, because of where America's place is in democracy in the world, the leader that we're supposed to be and have been in that, though we've made mistakes, obviously, but we've always been somebody that's tried to perfect our own democracy and help others in theirs. A Donald Trump presidency, which he's already told us what it will be, so we ought to believe what he says. And believe what he tells other people and just believe him. This is what he wants to do. He wants to establish a dictatorship, and he wants to establish a system that's most akin to fascism, as he has actually enunciated his own way. And that, to me, not only puts this election in a level of importance, but raises it even higher than any of us would have imagined 5 years ago, actually. And that's one of the pieces of advice we can get into that I would say is the way to deal with this is don't wait. You have to confront it early. I think the mistakes that were made by a lot of the people in the media, I think people in the Republican Party who are now aghast at it, is that they didn't confront this problem right when it began and right when it began to flower and seed in the course of this. And so I would say to my Canadian friends who are pro-democracy is don't talk yourselves out of it can't happen here, it won't happen here, we have institutions in place, we're not like that. It happened in America when many of us and many people thought it couldn't happen here. And so the important thing is to confront it as soon as possible.
Well, I really appreciate that. And as a pundit on Canadian airwaves since 2015, I've been concerned about Trump. I had a lot of Canadian colleagues accuse me of Trump derangement syndrome over the last number of years. And in Canada, we are seeing a rise in extreme right-wing rhetoric. We saw an occupation of our capital city a couple of years ago during the pandemic. We are seeing some disturbing things. I've written a column in our large paper, the Toronto Star, here in Canada, about the similarities between some of the rhetoric we're seeing from Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives and some of the stuff we saw from Trump back in 2016. But here we are now. We're within a couple of weeks of an election that when I hear Trump talk about Canada, he has a little bit, talks about us having a giant spout of water that he just needs to turn on for California. I mean, we have natural resources. We're deeply concerned about keeping our sovereignty up in this country from any kind of ideas of manifest destiny coming from Trump and crew. We've heard them at different political conferences, Tucker Carlson and others over the years, talk about Canada and how we have this, whatever they're calling Trudeau, a communist or whatever. We don't want America with a fascist leader looking at our country in any of those ways. So I take your advice to heart. Don't assume that we can't have similar movements in Canada. Don't assume that this is not something that we should be taking seriously, and calling it out early and often. What does it feel like to be a Kamala supporter in Texas? I know she's planning on going to Houston, which I think is pretty bold, but you are really in an area where we're seeing the Senate race, of course. Hopefully you can get Ted Cruz out of there. As Canadians, we don't love the affiliation with Senator Ted Cruz. We'd like him to be.
Can you have him back? Can you take him back?
No, we are not accepting Ted Cruz back. I'm speaking now for all of Canada. We do not want Ted Cruz back. Is Texas at all in play? Are you sensing a difference on the streets, Matthew, that people are done with this whole Trump thing? And do you think this Kelly news is going to make some of your former Republican colleagues and friends say, you know what, this is a bridge too far? Like, I'm not interested in a fascist. tax cuts be as they may, don't want a fascist in the White House.
Well, it's all great questions, and I'll start and go through them as quick as I can. So, living in Texas, and I've lived in red areas of Texas, it has been problematic, I would say, to say the least. I've had death threats. I've been called by the FBI to say that you're on the list of people that somebody wasn't to send a pipe bomb to. They had your address. Don't open up any packages that you don't know who they're from. All of that has happened only by virtue of my commentary critical of Donald Trump. That kind of stuff surfaces. You're confronted. I'm confronted at grocery stores at times, less today than before. And I think what's happened in Texas and probably everywhere else is that I think the supporters of democracy and the supporters of Democrats were in the face of this backed off, like, for a while. Like, I don't want to deal with it. It's just too much for me. And I think over the last few years, they've kind of said, I got to stand up to this. This is my America. I want to stand up to this. And so I feel more of a kinship with more people, and there's more of us standing up than there was, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. So that's all good news. And I think that is true in a lot of places. I think that's true not just in Texas, but a lot of other places. Texas has been moving again to a purple state. People forget it was a Democratic state, then it became a purple state, and then it became a red state. It's been moving over the last 3 or 4 elections back to purple. I mean, this is a race where Obama lost by double digits in 2012, and then Hillary lost by 8 or 9, and then Joe Biden lost by 5 or 6. The Vice President Harris, will close that gap even more. I think it may be tough to get over the final percentage, but I think she's going to be within 2 or 3 points. And that's a hugely significant thing in Texas, because once Texas shifts, this whole electoral college problem that exists will be gone, because Texas has so many electoral votes, and then it's worth 2.5 Michigans, or a Michigan, a Pennsylvania, and a Wisconsin. So that is all good news. I actually think Ted Cruz, the race for Senate is 50-50. I want the vice president to win. But if Ted Cruz can get defeated, I know Ted Cruz. I worked with Ted Cruz, and to know Ted Cruz is to despise Ted Cruz. As anybody that's worked with him on any level, even I think U.S. senators who are Republicans admit they can't stand the guy. He hasn't been good for the state. He only cares about himself. All of that. I think Colin Allred's run a really good campaign. I think many people in America will be surprised if Colin Allred wins. I won't be surprised, because I think we're right there on the verge of it. And so I think Ted's highly unpopular. Republicans don't really like him. He doesn't do anything. And so that, to me, if there was like the A level thing to happen, which is Kamala winning, the 1A thing to happen would be Ted Cruz losing. So, and I think it can happen. It's one of the races I'll be watching on election night as the votes come in. The early votes going on right now in Texas, it's been hugely strong. I think 1 million people have already voted early, and we've had it for 1.5 days, early voting. So There's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of movement. I'm very happy about it. I'm very, as you know from reading my social media feed, I actually think Kamala's going to win. I don't think it's going to be as close as people say, but it's all dependent on the work over the next 12 days. So we got to run through the tape. We got to work until the clock strikes 000. But I think she's got the advantage. And if we here do the work, she's going to be the first woman president of the United States, which will be an astounding thing.
Well, I love to hear that. And just to button up the whole Ted Cruz thing, on election night, I will be in Mexico watching what's going on. Not Cancun, though, where he went when things got tough in Texas. So maybe there'll be some cheers there if he's defeated as well. And as I understand it, all the big papers in Texas are saying he's got to go. And so hopefully that kind of editorial commentary still has some resonance. So that to me also would be, you know what, if you can't get all the electoral votes in Texas, let's at least get rid of Ted Cruz. So without getting too deep into the polls, because they're a snapshot and they're going to change between now and election day. I've been counting on your analysis because you seem to predict what we're going to expect and what we're going to see. And I heard a wonderful thing from one of your colleagues recently that it really is within not just the margin of error, it's so close, but the margin of effort to underscore what you just said. If Democrats and this pro-democracy coalition, the largest political movement maybe in the history of the world in terms of a coalition, if it shows up and shows out for the next however many days until November 5th, she could win this by bigger than this 51-49 thing that we're all hearing about, correct?
Yes. And I mean, the thing that I've tried to say is this race is not like 2020 and it's not like 2016 for a variety of reasons. It's more like 2012. Where the race felt very, very close. People forget that Mitt Romney, it was dead even at this point. 2 weeks out, it was dead even between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in 2012. And Barack Obama ended up winning by 4 and ended up winning comfortably in the Electoral College because in the end, he had an enthusiasm advantage. Kamala has an enthusiasm advantage, and the Democratic ticket right now is an enthusiasm advantage right now that Hillary didn't have in 2016. And she has a trust of the American people advantage that Hillary didn't have in 2016. And so I think many of the people that worked for Barack Obama and helped put together the organization to turn out the vote is in place for Kamala. I think she has, all of the indicators that you look at state by state and all the things are pointing in that direction of it. But as you say, you have to work until the clock strikes 000. It is a level of effort that has to be done. And then I think we're going to also be, regardless of the outcome, because of the Donald Trump's character and his craziness, we'll be dealing with this all the way till Inauguration Day, just because of what he's put in place. I always tell people that to me, he's like a rat in a rat family in a house. He's the head rat. So we may exterminate the rat, but the rat has had a lot of babies. Donald Trump has had a lot of babies and recruited other fellow rats or revealed other fellow rats, that even the defeat of Donald Trump is not the end of the democracy movement. It's really just the start of cleaning this up in America in the course of this, which obviously is important to Canada and everybody in Canada. But I think that all of the stuff is there for it to take place. I get calls and texts all the time from Democrats who have a tendency to be always hand-wringing and nervous. Different than Republicans. And I've worked on both sides of the aisle in campaigns. One of the big differences, Democrats always have a tendency to think the worst is going to happen. Republicans always seem to project what they want to happen. Democrats have to start projecting what they want to happen, put their chest out and say, we're going to win this thing. We got this. We just have to work until the final minute of this race and get off of this. Oh my God, what could happen? I just saw a poll and what's going to happen? And they get themselves all spun out in anxiety, and many, as you know, just from people's own lives, when you get spun in anxiety, you have a tendency to not do anything. Right. And so you got to get yourself out of the anxiety in order to do the work you need to do.
That's excellent advice. And I think Michelle Obama tried to get ahead of that at the convention in her speech when she said, when you see those polls, and there will be bad ones, do something, right? Do something.
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to work with Democrats abroad. They invited me to help them out on this, to get the word out to, there are millions of people who can still cast ballots abroad, who need to get animated and get engaged, because to just sit and to fear is not the way to get rid of this threat. And I actually remember Nancy Pelosi famously saying, we don't agonize, we organize. And I can tell you that every single business leader I've had lunches with through my work, Matthew, many women leaders, especially, for months since Kamala Harris, the big change happened, we have been toasting and manifesting her success. And I have to feel that there are billions of women around the world and girls who are looking at this and saying, not only do we need to stop this fascist threat for geopolitical reasons, but we also need to see that woman in that chair, because she's earned it and she is compassionate. She came out today and said she's a pragmatic capitalist. Great. She's better than Trump on every metric, no matter what people, some of my viewers and listeners are very, very progressive. They might not like her using the capitalist word here in Canada, but the reality is the difference between a pragmatic capitalist with a good heart, with a solid career fighting for the people, versus a fascist who is, an adjudicated rapist and a racist and all kinds of things that we would not even associate with in our life. Trump cannot become the president of the United States. So let me ask you, if I can, what is your closing argument? If you're chief strategist for the Kamala campaign, I know David Plouffe's in there and some other great people who worked with Obama, but if you were the chief strategist, what would be the closing argument in these days remaining?
So this will just be my gut. It just sort of a sense. I would say, if I were them, I would say, don't listen to Democrats. Don't listen to politicians. Listen to the people that work for Donald Trump. And I would put a whole series of things together and said, don't listen to us. Just listen to the people that Donald Trump hired that now don't want him anywhere near the White House. And that's what I would do, because that actually takes it out of the partisan appeal and says, okay, we're just going to listen to the people that he hired, all the people from generals to chiefs of staff to all of that. That would be my final argument, is listen to them. And this is the danger that he poses to America. That to me is one of the most powerful things, because one of the advice I would give progressives that might watch this or are very concerned about what may happen in Canada is you have to build allies among people that you never thought you would be allied with. Democracy movement in America, and actually, if you look around the world, only succeeds if you build allies with people that were, quote unquote, your former enemies, who may disagree with you on issues. This is, you sort of go back, we don't seem to learn lessons of history. Hitler, it was evident what Hitler was going to do, but there was a whole bunch of people that said, we can control him. No, he's not going to be too bad. We can work with him. And I think building allies with conservatives in Canada early on, like people like Liz Cheney, who's a conservative in America, who now is with Kamala, is the important part of stemming this off. And so I guess one of the benefits Canadians have is they can see what happened here. And so it's maybe more real. But I would say build relationships with people that you normally have fought with in order to preserve the democracy movement.
I think that is exceptional advice. And I have been thrilled to see the broad coalition that Kamala is building and bringing Liz. I never thought in a million years, no offense to your former boss, Dick Cheney, I've never thought I would want to see a Cheney as much on stage as I have. But you know what? She's showing profiles and courage, right? Her and Adam Kinzinger and others. And I must say, I have been following, to your point about how Democrats have a kind of a hand-wringing ethos about them. I have found a lot of interest and advice in many of the former Trumpers who are doing podcasts, the Lincoln Project. In fact, in Canada, there is now something called the Pearson Project, which is trying to start a pro-democracy coalition in that spirit to try to get, some of our are concerning politicians, get them out of leadership positions, or at least start ringing the alarm loudly. So that idea of working together, to working across the aisle, if you will, to building a pro-democracy coalition, I think that's excellent wisdom, Matthew. And I also really take to heart this idea that it's too easy to say, well, it couldn't possibly happen. You know, America's got checks and balances. But then we saw one of your three branches cave to Trump and say, you know, he's unfettered, right? That's shocking. We're watching the rights of women and girls being taken away. I would have died if I hadn't had a DNC surgery after my first miscarriage, you know, but I was able to go on and have my family after that. The idea that women in the US will be deprived of that those basic medical procedures is horrifying, you know, and so there are so many reasons why this fight is so very real for us. But on that last question about, yeah, well, we know Trump, he's just a joker, he's just extreme, blah, blah, blah. It was David Frum, another famous Canadian, who said recently, you know, that the Velociraptors have figured out how to open up the doors now, you know, which I heard this morning, and I thought that's a great line from David. You know, it's not the same. It's not going to be the same. Stephen Miller, all these pardons, having all those guys, you know, having that crew around Trump and empowered. I think if you can just speak to that one point of, this is not a repeat of what we saw in 2016. This would be a very different, if you can just kind of put a warning on it for the world, Matthew, so that we clearly understand.
Sure. So Donald Trump, for all his bananas behavior, had actually hired people that were constraining him, that were governors on him. So it's like what happens on a go-kart. So your child can't drive it too fast and spin out or whatever. They put a little governor. He had a number of governors on it, of people that were Republican establishment that actually prevented him from doing worse damage. He did a lot of damage, an incredible amount of damage, but worse damage. I mean, he was prevented from using the military to shoot at protesters, and he was prevented from doing other executive orders that would have been completely anti-democratic. That's gone. So he's already enunciated, and everyone around him has enunciated, and he's picked a vice president, a different kind of vice president. And I was no fan of Mike Pence, but at least Mike Pence had enough principles to stand up in a moment. He's actually said out of his way, I picked the wrong vice president because he wants somebody that's going to totally do exactly what he wants. And so he is only going to hire people that follow his exact orders and exactly what he wants. And maybe even worse, appeal to his, even if this is possible, his worse instincts. I mean, I guess with Donald Trump, there's no best instincts. There's just worse and worser instincts that he has. But he's going to have people around him that we've already seen that are, and we've seen it in the last 2 weeks of what the stuff he's saying on stage, and nobody in the sort of surrounding him telling him to stop the crazy stuff he's saying. They're just saying, go for it. That is a huge concern. And so we were good people of conscience, prevented him from doing worse damage. The institutions in many ways held, some were damaged. But the problem is he's going to put people in charge that are worse people, and they're going to damage those institutions. And I fear, and again, I don't want to say it's as hyperbolic, I fear that if he's elected, that may be the last real democratic election that we have in the United States at a federal level. I really believe that.
It is terrifying. We hear every cycle, this is the most important election of your lifetimes. This feels like the most important election for the world. And yes. I don't think that we can understate that. Ukraine alone, he cannot surrender Ukraine to Putin. We've all seen what hot war in Europe ends up with a guy like Putin who wants to take over.
Well, he'll decimate NATO. He'll pull out of NATO. I mean, he's already signaled everything he's going to do. He's going to put trade things in place that are going to ruin international trade. He's going to make economies across the world suffer with the actions he's going to take. It's not just we may lose our democratic freedoms. The entire economy of the world is probably at risk.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that, because we can get caught in this freedom conversation, which can seem esoteric to some. We can get caught in this women's right conversation, which might seem non-relevant to some, although I can't imagine how. But really, it's also the economy's stupid, to quote Carville, right? And you're our biggest trading partner. We went through a Trump negotiation around the North American Free Trade Agreement already when he first came in. The idea of those tariffs are terrifying, I think, to the global economy. So mean, we can make the argument all day, Matthew, that Trump has to be stopped, but I really appreciate you taking time out of this incredibly busy time in your life trying to stop this dictatorship to come on and to talk to Canadians and to give us the advice to work in coalitions with each other, to work across the aisle, to, you know, speak up early and often, to make sure that we don't think that we're above it or somehow we're immune to fascism, because we're not. I want to just share something that you tweeted the other day, because you won't believe how much your poetry tweets actually lift and elevate my day, Matthew. So if I can end our conversation on this.
Sure.
You quoted Iran-born British writer Doris Lessing, born in 1919. Very few people really care about freedom, about liberty, about the truth. Very few. Very few people have guts, the kind of guts on which a real democracy has to depend. Without people with that sort of guts, a free society dies or cannot be born. Sir, you have those kind of guts. And I hate that you get death threats, but I deeply appreciate all that you have done in your career, and especially in the recent years, to really help America stay the robust democracy, the shining city on the hill, if you were, that we need it to be at this time in the world. So thank you, Matthew Dowd, very much. And I want to thank also people at the Bulwark, Tim Miller, Charlie Sykes, all those guys, Sarah, everybody who is also sacrificing so much politically to try and in their careers to try to stop Trump, the Never Trumpers. It is a huge coalition. Kamala, Waltz, vote for them if you can. If you've got one of those ballots, vote for them. I don't care what country you're in. I'd love to have that ballot and use it, and I can't. So all I can do is talk about it and encourage you to go out and vote. And thank you to all the people who subscribe on YouTube and to our podcast where you find podcasts. Sir, I hope we can have you back after the election to discuss where we are leading up to inauguration and hopefully Kamala Harris becoming the first woman president. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you for all you do. Mutual Admiration Society here for everything you do on the pro-democracy. It takes a village across the world to do this, and every country it matters. So thank you for all you do. And I would love to come back. I'd love to come back and say, what does that Harris administration look like? So I would love to have that conversation.
Let's manifest that. Let's manifest that. Thank you, my friend. Take care and be safe in Texas. And good luck. Good luck getting rid of Ted Cruz.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. A lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.